So what do medieval alchemists, pretty gruesome 19th century prison experiment, the Gothic novel Frankenstein, and Russian rocket scientists all have in common?
I mean, it sounds like a weird setup for a joke,
Well,
honestly.
right, it really does. But they're actually all milestones in this incredibly bizarre, terrifying, but kind of awe-inspiring quest, like the human pursuit of godhood.
Yeah, and welcome to today's deep dive, by the way.
Yeah.
We're exploring a truly profound source text today.
Yes, exactly. And the mission of this deep dive for you listening at home is, well, we're trying to trace this massive historical evolution, like how humanity shifted from a mindset of just passively suffering through life to this active, technological pursuit of immortality and cosmic power.
It's a complete fundamental rewiring of how humans view their place in the universe. I mean, the sources just give you this detailed timeline of human audacity.
Audacity is the perfect word for it.
Right, because we're tracing that shift from believing our fate is entirely out of our hands to suddenly realizing we might actually be the architects of our own evolution.
And the analogy that kept surfacing for me as I read through all this research is it's like trying to upgrade a computer.
Oh, yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Right, because before humanity could even start to think about upgrading our hardware, our physical bodies, conquering disease, extending our lifespans, our ancestors fundamentally had to rewrite our cultural software.
They had to actually believe that upgrading the system was even permissible in the first place,
Yeah.
which, was not a given.
No, not at all. And to understand the sheer scale of that software rewrite, you kind of have to look at the starting point.
Exactly. So in the Middle Ages, the prevailing Christian doctrine, which was shaped heavily by thinkers like Augustine in the City of God and later Thomas Aquinas, it demanded absolute submission.
Like zero pushback allowed.
None. Earthly life was literally viewed as a punishment. I mean, because of original sin, humanity was seen as being in a state of exile.
So the physical body was essentially like a prison cell you were just supposed to endure.
Yeah, the flesh was something to be mortified, not optimized. I mean, people wore hair shirts, they fasted, they practiced self-flagellation just to, suppress their physical desire.
Wow.
The core belief was basically that you weren't supposed to improve your material condition on Earth at all. You were supposed to patiently, quietly endure your punishment and wait for the kingdom of heaven after you died.
It's the ultimate passive waiting game. You just sit in the waiting room of life, hoping your number gets called for paradise. But then, and this is where it shifts, the Renaissance happens.
Right, the big turning point.
Yeah, you get these cities like Florence, Venice, Genoa, and they're building immense wealth through global trade. And suddenly the whole vibe just changes.
People have resources, and they want power over matter right now. Not in the afterlife, but now.
But how did they actually justify that philosophically? Like, did they just wake up one day and decide, hey, we want to live forever?
Well, no, the justification came from this huge influx of ancient knowledge. We owe a massive debt to Arab scholars, actually, like Jabir ibn Hayyan in the 8th century.
Oh, right, because they preserved and advanced those ancient texts while Europe was largely intellectually stagnant.
Exactly. They laid the groundwork for alchemy. But the real philosophical spark in Europe came from the Hermetic texts. So in the 1460s, the de' Medici family in Florence, very powerful family, they commissioned Marsilio Ficino to translate these ancient mystical documents.
And out of those texts, we get the Emerald Tablet, which I always thought alchemy was just, a bunch of greedy guys in robes trying to turn lead into gold.
That's a stereotype.
You're right. But reading the actual philosophy behind the Emerald Tablet, it sounds entirely different. I mean, weren't these early alchemists essentially the world's first biohackers?
They absolutely were. That's a great way to frame it. Alchemy was this deeply spiritual science. The central tenet of the Emerald Tablet is the phrase, as above, so below.
Okay, so that concept is the crucial software update.
Exactly. It argued for a direct link between the microcosm, meaning the human body and earthly elements, and the macrocosm, which is the universe and the divine.
Meaning, if you tweak something down here, it ripples up there.
Precisely. It gave humans the philosophical green light to actually manipulate earthly matter. It meant the universe was this interconnected web, and humans actually had agency within it.
Which is a huge leap from just sitting and suffering.
Huge. And this momentum really culminates with figures like Paracelsus in the 16th century. He was a complete medical radical.
Oh, the book-burning guy.
Yeah. He publicly burned the classic dogmatic medical texts of his day, right in the town square.
Talk about a dramatic statement. I mean, why burn the books? What was his core argument?
Well, Paracelsus basically declared that doctors must act as alchemists because he believed God left creation unfinished.
Wait, really? God made a mistake.
Or just didn't finish the job.
Mm-hmm.
Nature's imperfect, right? It generates disease, decay, all that stuff. So Paracelsus argued that it is actually the human being's sacred job to complete God's work through art and science.
Oh, wow. So he was actively searching for the universal medicine, the elixir of life, to defeat what he saw as the ultimate technical error, which is death.
Exactly. So the software is officially rewritten. We've gone from suffer quietly to let's finish what God started.
But alchemy was still wrapped in all this mysticism and astrology and spiritualism. So when do we get to the point where we start looking at the body not as this magical vessel, but as a machine we can just take apart with a wrench?
That really happens with the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. You get thinkers like René Descartes and Isaac Newton, and they began stripping away the magical aura of the cosmos.
They brought in the math.
Right, empirical observable science. The universe was no longer this mystical tapestry. It was a giant, predictable clockwork. And if the universe is a clock, it forces a really radical question about human beings.
That we must just be smaller clocks walking around inside the big one.
That is the exact conclusion a French physician named Julien Offray de Lemaitre reached. So in 1747, he published this incredibly scandalous book called Man and Machine.
I mean, the title kind of says it all.
It does. He argued that the human body is just a complex, self-winding mechanical system. He completely stripped away the concept of an immaterial soul governing our biology.
Honestly, if you're a listener right now sitting at your desk feeling like just a cog in a corporate machine, you are literally experiencing the cultural hangover of Lemaitre's philosophy.
Yeah, pretty much.
He argued that if one gear in the body stops, the other gears just keep turning until the whole system breaks down. It's pure bioengineering.
And once you view the body as a machine made of gears and levers, the immediate scientific next step is trying to find the energy source that powers it. Like a clock has a tightly wound spring. So what is the human spring?
And they found the answer in electricity.
Yes.
Luigi Galvani starts making severed frog legs twitch with static electricity. But his nephew, Giovanni Aldini, he's the one who took this concept out of the laboratory and turned it into public spectacle.
Oh, man, Aldini. Yeah, in 1803, he held this demonstration in London at Newgate Prison. He basically secured the fresh corpse of an executed criminal, a man named George Forster.
Oh, this part is so wild.
It really is. In front of this live audience of medical professionals and dignitaries, Aldini applied high-voltage electrical currents from a primitive battery directly to the corpse.
Yeah, the descriptions in the sources are just pure nightmare fuel. Like, when he applied the probes, the corpse's jaw quivered, the left eye opened, the legs kicked, and the fists clenched.
It was so visceral and terrifying that one of the officials present supposedly died of fright shortly after going home.
Which is crazy. But it was horrific scientific theater that proved a monumental point, right? It shook European society to its core.
Absolutely. Because it suggested life might not be a divine breath from God. Life might just be a physical chemical process, a series of electrical impulses that can be manipulated and potentially rebooted. I can only imagine how deeply spooked the general public was by this realization. And the timing is not a coincidence at all. This is exactly the cultural anxiety that Mary Shelley taps into when she writes Frankenstein in 1818.
Yes, exactly.
Now, the common cultural takeaway from Frankenstein is usually, see, technology's bad. Man shouldn't play God. But digging into this text, that feels like a massive misreading.
Oh, completely.
It seems like Mary Shelley wasn't warning us against the technology itself, but against the creators wielding it. Am I right on that?
You are. The author of our source text makes this exact argument, and it is a vital distinction to make. Shelley's subtitle for the novel was The Modern Prometheus.
Right.
And Victor Frankenstein actually succeeded in his Promethean task. He created a biologically superior being. The creature in the book is not some lumbering zombie.
Yeah, the movie versions really ruined that perception.
They really did. In the book, he is 8 feet tall,
Right.
incredibly fast, can survive freezing temperatures without special clothing, and requires very little food.
He essentially built a proto-astronaut, like hardware version 2.0, perfectly adapted for harsh conditions.
Exactly. The failure was entirely moral. Victor Frankenstein lacked empathy, courage, and ethical maturity. I mean, he ran away from his creation simply because the biological process of its assembly left it aesthetically ugly.
He judged a book by its very hastily stitched cover.
Yeah. He didn't guide it. He didn't nurture it. The creature was inherently intelligent and capable of immense good. I mean, he teaches himself to read Milton and Plutarch in the woods.
Which is wild.
It was society's violent rejection of him that turned him into a monster. So the novel's warning isn't don't build the machine. The warning is if you're going to wield the power of the gods, you better have the ethical maturity of a god to take responsibility for it.
It's like handing a loaded, high-powered rifle to a toddler. The problem isn't the rifle, the problem is the toddler holding it.
Exactly.
And the literature of the 19th century just keeps hammering this anxiety about our lack of readiness. Looking at Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Another great example.
Right, because this one isn't about stitching body parts together. It's about neurochemistry. Jekyll creates a serum that essentially acts as a chemical lobotomy.
A chemical lobotomy of the conscience, yes. It strips away the cultural and ethical superego. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer wrote extensively about this. He called it the blind will.
The blind will.
Yeah, the primal, irrational, unquenchable drive to survive and consume that exists beneath all of our civilized logic.
So Jekyll's potion just basically shuts down the frontal lobe and lets that blind will take the wheel.
Precisely. Edward Hyde isn't just a villain. He is a biological regression. He is primitive, animalistic, and violently untethered from morality.
So both Shelley and Stevenson are really projecting the same profound warning here.
Yes. Wielding unprecedented technological and biological power without a parallel moral and ethical evolution will just lead to absolute disaster.
Okay, so literature paints the nightmare scenarios of unchecked biological power. We have the ambition, we have the mechanical understanding of the body, and we have the terrifying warnings.
The stakes are set.
Right, so how are we supposed to actually navigate this? Like, who gives us the roadmap to safely step into this godlike role?
Well, the philosophical roadmap emerges from two fascinating parallel movements in the late 19th and early 20th centuries: Russian Cosmism and the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche in Germany.
And the Russian cosmists, I mean, they were operating on a scale that makes modern tech billionaires look incredibly modest.
Oh, totally. They were thinking in terms of the entire universe. Nikolai Fedorov, who was a foundational figure in Cosmism, he argued that the ultimate literal duty of science was to resurrect the dead.
Which is just a staggering thought.
Every single human who ever lived. He believed we needed to gather their scattered atoms and reconstruct our ancestors.
No pressure or anything?
Right. For Fedorov, humanity's common task was to stop being passive victims of nature and become active co-creators of cosmic evolution.
And his student, Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, takes this even further. He's actually known as the father of theoretical astronautics. You know, the guy who figured out rocket equations.
Yeah, a brilliant mind.
But he wasn't just building rockets to plant a flag on the moon. It seems like he was building a philosophical escape hatch for the whole human race.
He absolutely was. Tsiolkovsky looked at the second law of thermodynamics, the principle of entropy.
The idea that things fall apart.
Exactly. Entropy is the idea that the universe is constantly winding down, moving from order to chaos, eventually ending in a cold, dark heat death. Tsiolkovsky looked at that inevitable doom and just said, no.
Just, I refuse.
Yeah. He said intelligent life exists specifically to conquer entropy.
So it's not just about surviving as a species. It's about fighting the fundamental physics of the universe.
Yes. He envisioned humanity eventually abandoning our fragile biological bodies entirely. In his view, flesh is just too vulnerable.
Gets sick, it breaks.
Exactly. So we would need to evolve into what he called radiant humanity. These would be post-biological beings that feed directly on solar energy, immortal, colonizing the cosmos, and turning the chaos of dead matter into an ordered, rational universe.
Now, I have to pause here, because this is where the cosmists start to lose me a little bit.
How so?
Well, becoming a being of pure, radiant energy sounds, I don't know, sterile. It sounds awful. Like, I like eating good food. I like the physical sensation of a hug. I like being biological. Doesn't this vision just completely destroy everything that actually makes us human?
I get that. But the cosmists would argue that your attachment to those biological pleasures is exactly what keeps humanity anchored to suffering and death.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, our biology dictates our greed, our tribalism, our physical decay. So to them, shedding the body isn't losing our humanity. It's distilling human intelligence and reason to its purest, most powerful form.
I guess.
You know, we can't conquer the stars if we still need to stop for lunch and worry about catching a cold.
Okay, I see the logic, even if it genuinely terrifies me. But it still requires a massive psychological leap. How do we mentally prepare to leave our humanity behind?
Well, that brings us to Nietzsche.
And I feel like Nietzsche is the most misunderstood philosopher in history. He's usually just reduced to edgy quotes on dorm room posters.
Oh, completely. Let's start with his most famous declaration from A Gay Science, God is Dead.
Yeah, people usually repeat that as if Nietzsche was taking a victory lap, like he was cheering for the end of religion.
Exactly. But when his character, the madman, runs into the marketplace yelling, God is dead, and we have killed him, it is not celebration at all. It is a terrifying, desperate diagnosis.
Oh, interesting.
Nietzsche was pointing out that the Enlightenment and the rise of secular science had eroded the foundations of the Christian paradigm. For 2,000 years, that paradigm provided a universally accepted moral compass. Suffer now, follow the rules, get rewarded in heaven.
Right. And with the collapse of that belief system, Nietzsche saw a massive vacuum.
Yes. And he warned that this vacuum would lead straight into nihilism. Because if there's no heaven and no divine rules, why do anything hard? Why be good at all?
So without a new vector, a new goal to strive for, humanity devolves into what Nietzsche called the last man.
The last man.
And reading his description of the last man is deeply uncomfortable, honestly, because it feels incredibly relatable to modern life.
It really hits close to home.
It does. He describes the last man as someone who just wants warmth, a little poison for pleasant dreams, making everything small and comfortable. They avoid hard work, they avoid risk, they avoid greatness.
They just want to be cozy.
Yes. When you're sitting on your couch, doom scrolling on your phone for 3 hours, just seeking a tiny dopamine hit, avoiding any real challenges, you are experiencing exactly what Nietzsche feared.
Absolutely. The last man is the ultimate consumer. They just want to be satiated. They invent happiness and just blink passively at the universe. Nietzsche saw this as a pathetic evolutionary dead end.
So how do we get out of it?
To escape the trap of the last man, we have to strive for the Übermensch, the Superman.
Yeah.
And he outlines the path to the Übermensch through these 3 transformations of the spirit, which, honestly, sounds like a psychological version of alchemy.
It is mental alchemy. The 3 transformations are the camel, the lion, and the child. So first, your spirit must become a camel.
Why a camel?
The camel bears the heavy weight of society's rules, traditions, and the thou shalt commands. It is a state of conformity and endurance. Most of humanity never evolves past the camel, actually.
Wow.
But to grow, the spirit must venture into the desert and transform into a lion.
The lion is the destroyer, right? The rebel.
Yes. The lion's defining phrase is I will. The lion battles the great dragon of societal norms whose scales are covered in the words thou shalt. The lion destroys the old values and clears the space.
But the lion can only destroy. It can't create anything new.
Exactly. For that, you need the final transformation, which is the child.
Now, that part always tripped me up. Why a child? That seems like a step backward from a lion, honestly.
It seems like it, but a child represents a new beginning, a sacred yes to life. The child isn't burdened by the past. The child creates new values with innocence and this pure, uncorrupted, creative will.
Okay, so the Übermensch is basically achieved in 2 stages then. First, the mental upgrade, the software, right? Overcoming herd mentality, embracing this creative will to power and saying yes to life.
Yes.
And only then are we mentally prepared for the physical transformation, the hardware upgrade, becoming something post-biological like the cosmists predicted.
That is the exact sequence. And here, we really must explicitly dismantle the most toxic historical misinterpretation of all time.
Oh, we definitely need to talk about this.
The Nazis completely hijacked Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch.
The whole blonde beast master race myth.
It is a complete fabrication of his intent. The historical record is crystal clear on this, actually. The weaponization of Nietzsche's work was largely orchestrated by his sister, Elizabeth Förster Nietzsche.
I didn't know his sister was involved.
Oh, heavily. After Nietzsche suffered a severe mental collapse and spent his last 11 years incapacitated, Elizabeth took control of his estate and his archives. And she was a rabid nationalist and a vocal anti-Semite.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she forged, altered, and selectively edited his unpublished fragmented notes to create a book called The Will to Power. She artificially aligned his brilliant philosophy with crude Nazi ideology.
Well, Nietzsche himself actually despised nationalism, actively hated it.
He loathed it. In his letters, he called anti-Semitism despicable and explicitly identified himself as a good European, actively rejecting German nationalism entirely.
That's a huge distinction.
It really is. His Übermensch has absolutely nothing to do with racial superiority or dominating others through violence. The Übermensch is a titan of the spirit. The will to power is about self-mastery.
Like overcoming your own laziness.
Exactly. It is about overcoming your own internal chaos and creating art and meaning out of a meaningless universe. It is the ultimate rejection of the last man's apathy.
So when we pull all these threads together, the author of our source text makes a very specific, really powerful argument. We've gone from medieval monks whipping themselves, to alchemists in their labs realizing we have agency, to Frankenstein's monster warning us about ethics, to Tsiolkovsky dreaming of radiant humanity conquering entropy, and finally to Nietzsche demanding we overcome our own mediocrity.
It's quite the journey.
It is, and it all points to one inescapable conclusion. Humans are basically meant to be the architects of the universe.
And this is where we must fully, 100%, support the author's ultimate conclusion. The author introduces a concept that perfectly encapsulates this entire historical trajectory. It is the exact right term for this movement, and that term is theotechnocracy.
Theotechnocracy.
Yes, theotechnocracy. It is the ultimate fusion. Theo, meaning divine, godlike ambition, combined with absolute technocracy, which is the mastery of science, engineering, and matter.
Right, because for centuries we separated the two. Religion was about the soul and the afterlife, and science was just about the gears and the present.
Exactly. But theotechnocracy argues that they're actually the exact same project. The pursuit of godhood through the mastery of the machine.
We are holding the Promethean fire right now. I mean, today, that fire is artificial intelligence, it's CRISPR genetic editing, it's nanotechnology.
And the author's point, which the entire history of Cosmism and Nietzsche completely supports, is that we cannot draw off the fire.
We can't go backward.
No, we cannot hide in the cage, terrified of our own inventions. We must embrace theotechnocracy. It is our evolutionary duty.
Yeah.
If we want to conquer entropy, if we want to transform the dead, chaotic dust of the universe into an ordered, rational cosmos, we have to mature. We have to achieve the mental upgrade of the Übermensch so that we don't just destroy ourselves when we finally achieve the hardware upgrade of cosmic maturity.
It is the ultimate high-stakes game. We either devolve into the last man, doom-scrolling ourselves into comfortable extinction, or we step up, embrace theotechnocracy, and literally become the gods our ancestors prayed to.
It really is a binary choice in that sense.
It is. But as we wrap up this deep dive, there is a lingering thought I want to leave you, the listener, with. Something to mull over long after you take your headphones off.
It is a massive concept to digest, for sure.
Yeah. So if our evolutionary destiny, as the cosmos predict and theotechnocracy demands, is to eventually leave our fragile biological bodies behind, if we are truly meant to become pure, immortal, radiant energy to conquer the stars, what actually happens to human emotion?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Think about your own life. So much of what we value deeply, or, romantic love, heart-wrenching art, profound empathy, or even just the simple physical joy of a really good meal with friends, it is all intimately tied to our biological vulnerability.
Our hormones, our mortality.
And fragility. If we become immortal gods of pure energy, wielding the cosmos like a machine, do we transcend those emotions into something unimaginably greater? Or do we lose the very things that made us beautifully human in the first place? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.